oh, I have two cars, but you're living paycheck to paycheck. So it was one of those eye-opening moments to really, okay, I need to change it up and figure out myself first with my finances.
I am really excited to have Mike Damazo on, and he is in the U.S. Navy, and
Yeah.
he also is spreading the message of financial freedom through a lot of different methods. He's got an amazing YouTube channel. Instagram is on fire, and I love the stuff that he puts together. He's got such a creative way of telling things, making it very relatable, but also putting it visually stimulating. So I've had a lot of fun following Mike and taking that same message. And a lot of our message, whether I'm dealing with someone who's a lower level employee or an executive, it's all very same. And it's that same messaging. And I think Mike really brings this out. So I wanted to have Mike on the show just to help share this as well and hear his perspective. So Mike is actually coming to us from Japan. You're stationed over in Japan right now?
Yes, I'm stationed overseas currently. Coming from Japan. Thank you so much for your kind words about my channel and spreading the message of financial freedom.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's an important thing, and thank you for your service as well. So, being in the Navy, Air Force, Army, they're all important branches of the military, and doing that and serving others is sort of a theme that I'm noticing with you, whether it's in the military, as is essentially serving others, and spreading the good financial health is a very important message as well. So I'd love to kick it off by maybe just telling me a bit about your background and where you came to. And I know that when you came about this financial message, you were already in the military, and it sort of transitioned your financial habits to where you're at now. And I'd love to hear a bit about that transition that you went through.
So for me in the beginning, I didn't start off, being all financially savvy and knowing all about budgeting or maxing out my retirement accounts. It was definitely a transition of going through the trenches almost of being in debt and watching others go to payday loans at the time and living paycheck to paycheck. And it wasn't something I knew that was different, because was what was normal for me, where, okay, I get paid on the 1st and the 15th. I have enough to cover my rent and plenty to go splurge. So for me, it was when I was deployed in Guantanamo, where I actually took a class about personal finance. And in that class, there was other people that was different ranks, higher ranks than me, lower ranks and everything. I remember someone higher rank going up to talk about their story and how much debt they had. And at the time, she had a huge amount of debt, and she was very close to retirement, like 2 more years. And I was just thinking, that is very scary to exit out of this organization and into debt. And it basically made it seem like I'm very dependent on that paycheck. So that's when the gears started turning for me to really take charge and, be responsible for my spendings and my budget. And that catalyst made me really pursue what financial freedom was.
And
So go ahead.
I was going to say, in that, so you took that course and you were there. I'm assuming there probably wasn't a whole lot of new information that you didn't know just from hearing, but maybe it wasn't taught in the way that really resonated with you. Was there any new information that you had, or was it just seeing it in live, knowing that, having that ability to fast forward? Like, what was it that made it click for you?
For me, it was seeing it live and seeing it directly connected to me, as in someone that was in the same uniform as me, and it was, like I said, it was a bit fearful to think about getting out of the military and still being in debt, when at the time people would be like, oh, you're in the military, you get paid a lot of money. but you don't, and it's the perception of, I have two cars, but you're living paycheck to paycheck. So it was one of those eye-opening moments to really, okay, I need to change it up and figure out myself first with my finances. And then once I was able to do that, I was all like, I want to create content out there for someone that's me in the younger version of myself, basically, to be able to be like, hey, I just got in the military. I'm getting paid all this money. Now what do I do? Do I live paycheck to paycheck, buy all the things that I want to, or wait, there's a resource out there, someone that's actually went through the trenches and is trying to show me and guide me to not make the same mistakes they did.
That's really interesting because you take essentially that class that you were really lucky to take in Guantanamo Bay, and now you can share it outwardly with more people. And I know when I was in the reserves, when you think at the time, I didn't think about this. It was I go to the bars, you buy whatever you want. I didn't have a lot of responsibilities, and it's amazing what this leverage does by putting these responsibilities on me, and that was so cool. Looking back on it, because there's lessons learned now, but at the time, if I had really thought about it, I had like no expenses. You're on base all the time. You're barely doing anything. But to go and drop hundreds of dollars at the bar or whatever you're going to spend it on, you have this opportunity. Even the clothes you don't pay for because you're wearing a uniform most of the time, and then you wear your PT gear most of the other time. So it's you got one outfit that you wear in the evenings when you're going to the mess hall or something. Right? So, but
Yeah, even the food, like you've mentioned, going to the mess hall, like you're not paying
yeah.
for your food.
That's a big expense for a lot of people, and even just if you're working in an office environment and you're going out for lunch every day, those things add up. But the opportunity is there to not spend, but I think it's amazing because we look at buying a bigger house or a car, or I have this car but maybe I want a fancier one, or all those things like you're saying. You had two cars, and what was your mindset at the time about money versus how did you have to change that mindset to where it's like what was that mindset that had to change to create that inflection point to go from that jog left from where the direction that you're heading on to head on a new trajectory?
For me, the mind change was that feeling of I deserve it, like the materialistic things,
Mm.
such as like a payday and going out to the mall and then going, oh, I deserve to buy a new outfit just because it's the payday and I'm going out this weekend. Not that it didn't change from last weekend or next weekend. It was that cycle of, oh, I deserve to have this luxury car because I've been in the service for so long. And then talking to others, like where I knew inside, I was like, oh, I should get rid of this. But then I would ask my immediate like circle of people that was the same like mindset of I deserve it. And they would justify that spending of, no, you've been in for so long, you've made this rank, this is your trophy vehicle. Like, and you have your other vehicle for A to B. And it was something that I was like, no, like that doesn't seem right. At least like for me, where it was it was a transition of thinking about my net worth more so than looking rich and having that perception of new clothes and new cars and everything.
So it seemed like you were measuring your stuff, and it was a validation of the effort you put in, the danger we put
Yes.
ourselves in when we were in the military. Because at the end, no matter what branch or what job you're in, even a back office clerk who gets bombed in they can end up their lives are on the line no matter what branch you're in, and um, there's a validation that, like you say, you're worth it, and it's the accountability to say, look, I've accomplished this, I've worked for this. Here's how I know what I've done. And so now you have a different measurement. How do you measure yourself now about success and what you're entitled to, and how to feel wealthy in a sense?
For me, how I measure success is just being able to come home and know that there's food in the fridge. Like a full fridge just feels amazing to me, which I've had already. But it's also like my net worth is one that I do look at, but I don't try to tie everything in. I take more of a mindful approach with my finances, knowing that, I don't have any debt that I owe anyone. There's nothing coming due, and everything is just put into savings or going into maxing out my retirement accounts. So that's what feels good to me. And that's success. It's just being able to go home at the end of the day and coming home to like my wife and my dog. So
It sounds like there's a balanced approach. You mentioned being mindful there and just being conscious of the things, right? Like every movement, and when I was in combat arms and in reconnaissance, like every little movement. And I remember being in the interview, and the guy's like, "Oh yeah, here, I'm going to take your blood pressure." I'm like holding my arm out. He's like, "You're going to learn to be efficient. Like this is a waste of energy. Don't measure yourself." And so all of a sudden you start looking at yourself in different ways, and being that mindful approach towards money must be something that really, it must have been brought on by that course, I would imagine. Did you go through like a self-discovery process? Like what did you start looking at after that course to say, okay, how, like the areas that you're going to make changes in? Did you, like, how did you start? What were some of the steps that you took to start making changes? Like was there small steps that you sort of snowballed on to be big builder, or like you just like cold turkey it? I'm done spending. Like
no, I wish I would have cold turkey. I didn't. So at the time, actually, I used to smoke cigarettes, and so that was like I went one habit at a time. I didn't want to like stack different things of like, today I'm just gonna quit smoking, start savings, put a budget together. It was literally like, okay, well, what are things that for me in the long run doesn't make sense for my health and my wealth? Well, smoking was one. So I eliminated smoking. And then from there, it was, okay, now let's really do a budget and stick to that system. So it was really like just slowly increasing my savings. My TSP, for people in the US military, we have a TSP, which is the thrift savings plan. It's an equivalent to a 401k.
And in Canada, that's very similar to an RSP or
RSP.
I know people in Australia, they have got these super funds, so it's very similar to that as well. So,
that sounds even better.
I know. I want a super fund, right? I don't go to Australia. It's actually really neat. In Australia, employers are mandated to donate, or mandated to contribute, I think 9.25% of a paycheck from the minute you start working. And they're mandated that they can do that. You can put in additional savings, but you're getting almost 10% savings in Australia just by employer contributions. Really interesting.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really neat. But the 401k and a TSB, TSB, is it?
Yes, TSB. Thrift savings plan.
Perfect. Yeah, and that's but so you're taking advantage of this system that's out there. Everybody thinks about the tax man working against you, but they've set up some things and you turned it to work with you.
Yes. Like I did that for not just like with the TSB, but just anything that the Navy was providing for me, such as the tuition assistance for going to college. And like, I don't see a lot of people taking advantage of that, of like, here's X amount of money, take some classes. And I got stuck in, oh, I'm good. I want to go party, go hang out with friends this weekend. And after, like I've mentioned, after like having that budget, I was all like, okay, let me go work on classes now. So it was just stacking different habits as I accomplished them.
That mindfulness is interesting because you talk about, well, the first thing you sort of tackled was cigarettes, and that's a health thing. And I remember when I was in courses, if you're taking a break in between classes, they'd look around and say, oh, you're not smoking, you're not doing anything. They take the non-smokers to go do stuff. So it encouraged you to smoke. Did you have a similar experience?
Yes. And that's how it was with work, is you're constantly there. And then if you're a smoker, you could go smoke for like 5 to 15 minutes, and you're just kind of shooting crap with people. And then if you don't smoke, you're kind of stuck inside the building, and you're just like, oh my gosh, now one person's gone, so I'm taking that slack. So so it was like, that doesn't make sense, So.
I used to keep this like a little cigarette, and I had the end lit, but then I'd put it out and just pretend I was smoking. And they're like, when did you start smoking? I'm like, well, I'm just here. They're all standing around. So little tricks that we were forced to learn along the way.
Yeah, I would joke around when I first started quitting, I would tell people if they invite me over to like, go smoke just because they wanted to chat or whatever the case was. I was like, I'm gonna bring bubbles and I'm just gonna blow bubbles at all of you while you're smoking.
My kids have the bubble gun and they just shoot
Yeah.
them out. That'd be hilarious.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's amazing though, right? So you start smoking, and obviously there's in the military, some places can be very popular to smoke. And so you got the social pressures, you've got the physical pressures, you got the habitual part of it.
Yes.
And was that a financial aspect as well?
Yes, it definitely was a financial aspect just because I would smoke 3 packs in a week. So it would
Wow.
just that cost would add up. So it was like, well, don't worry about the latte right now. Let's worry about the pack of cigarettes we're spending in
Yeah,
a month.
that's
So
amazing. That's amazing though. So then you took that savings. Did you reapply it somewhere else? How did you? What did you do with that?
so for me, the small like something small like that with tackling not buying cigarettes anymore, I would switch that over to increasing my TSP contribution. So
Mm,
for every little win of, say, I started to do my budget more, I'd increase it to 1% more and
okay.
then increase it. So now I'm at like 25% with how much I contribute for my TSB.
That's amazing. So that's that crawl, walk, run approach. Whereas I'm just aware that I'm bleeding money. The next thing I'm going to walk it.
Yes.
So I'm going to start with a 1%, just that incremental change, and then I'm going to step it up every bit. And next thing you know, we'll get into more where you're at now. But it's that little thing about doing those little bits. How did you? I'm always curious. This is a conversation I have with a lot of people about how do you figure out whether to pay down debt or whether to invest in your 401k or TSB? How did you look at that conversation with yourself?
For me, it was just balancing out both. I didn't want to lose out on the time of actually making contributions to my TSP.
Mhm.
So it would it would have to be like a baseball approach of just like trying to take care of my debt with base hits, and still making sure that my debt was paid off. And then when a debt was paid off, it felt like a home run. It was like,
Right.
okay, boom, now I know I could get rid of that debt. Now it's on to the next one. And I've applied the method, the
Yeah.
debt snowball method for taking care of my debt, but also, not stopping contributions to my TSB.
Mm. What do you do if you have like a tough month or something? People, I like to set up separate accounts where I've got an allocation for Christmas and for birthdays, and we've got annual expenses that come up. So I contribute a small amount every month. What happens if do you prepare like that, or do you look at, is there a way that you deal with an unexpected expense that comes up?
So I forgot to mention that I did set up an emergency fund
Perfect.
before, and I set it up for 3 months worth. Now, personal finance is personal. People can set up whichever way they want. But for me, that was what was comfortable for me to be able to deal with if anything did come up. And I knew resources for people in the military where in the Navy, it's called Navy and Marine Relief Society. So if you do have, say, a medical emergency or an auto emergency or flying home because whatever emergencies back home, you could go to them and they help you out with, first they'll actually help you out with a budget and then they'll lend you money at I wouldn't say it was 0% and
Wow,
everything. So, and then they'll set everything up for the payment plan where it's already deducted from your military paycheck.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Are a lot of people in the military aware of this, or at least in the Navy? Like, is this something that's well known, or how's?
Yes, it's put out. At least for me, it's put out like a lot. Like people are aware of it. It's not just like people taking. It's also service members contributing to the Navy Relief Society campaign fund
Hmm.
so that they could build their capital more, and that's how it kind of builds itself. So I've had to before go to them because I had an emergency leave situation and they helped me out and everything was set up where I didn't even, it felt like I didn't see them taking the money because it was automatically taken from my paycheck. And I still contribute to them right now just because I know the help that they provided me at
That's
the time that I needed it.
and there's probably less of a chance that you would need it now, but you still contribute, and that's amazing to keep doing. And should you ever need it, it's still there for you. So that's great to keep on top of that.
Yes.
So I know that I love to get into the details on this stuff because these little things are things that people are trying to implement. I've all types of clients. They're constantly trying to figure out, okay, how do I get better control over my finances? So those little tips about starting small, just doing one little thing in front of the other, snowballing, like taking a one smaller debt and getting rid of it and then reallocating that cash, and looking for the smaller wins too in what's going on. So that a lot of people talk about giving money a purpose, and so you then reallocate it from cigarettes and other things. In your message, you talk about getting out of debt first and then investing. What's your approach, and what's the conversation you have with people about getting out of debt and then investing, or like how do you sort of hit that? Because there's sort of this inflection point where your debt's going down and then you're starting to build net worth, and then so we've sort of covered when your debt starts to go down, when you hit this inflection point and then it starts to go up. This inflection point, where do you like? Once you've started to make those changes, how do you start to shift focus on keeping the budget in place, but now starting to build wealth, or how do you approach that?
For me, my approach with going from getting the F out of debt and then building wealth is it doesn't have to be all your debt. Like, oh, I have zero debt, no more credit cards, but it's just paying off like that one credit card and leveling up in that way where you're like, okay, now I could focus on building wealth with increasing my TSP or say IRA for if you don't want to just do the military 401k. For me, it's just figuring out that first level of like, okay, that was the big bill or big debt that I had that I tackled. Now I could move on to increasing more into my retirement accounts and everything.
That's it's neat. So it sounds like you got yourself to a point when your cash flow felt more comfortable. And you like just got it to a point where you're able to be mindful enough, get rid of some of the expenses, reallocate, give it a purpose, and start saying, okay, look, I'm going to be smarter. You committed to it. Did your social circle change because of that? Because like you said, your friends were justifying, they're confirming your current spending habits. You had to change how you were acting. Did you have to change the feedback that you were getting as well, or how did that work out?
Yes, I definitely had to change the feedback I was getting. The reason being is if everyone wanted to go out and it wasn't in the budget, I would have to like politely decline and just pass. And I would have that FOMO, fear of missing out. So I would have to distract myself with either like reading or like playing video games just because I was like, no, there's a bigger goal here is to get out of debt and then build wealth. So it was one of those like, okay, I do still want to hang out with people. So I put it in the budget of being able to go out on big days with friends just to be able to, still not lose that friendships I've had. But I've also had to switch up what I was consuming with listening to more podcasts that's personal finance related or consuming content on YouTube that was personal finance and reading books that just helped me get to the place that I am now.
That's amazing. It's hard though, right? And I think
it is.
There's a transition stage, and I think if anything, it gives you an opportunity to be a leader because your friends are going to see you acting in the same way that they are, and all of a sudden they start changing. Like, hey, how'd that guy do it? And it's a bit of a motivator. On some, it could be discouraging, but others are going to pick up and say, you know what, I kind of want some of that too. And that's a positive thing to be that influence in your circle. So maybe not getting rid of the friends, but just saying, look, this is how I want to socialize. Here's my budget to a point, and then I'm not going to continue to spend, or you know what, I'm only going to buy 3 drinks tonight. I'm not going to spend 30 drinks tonight because there's a cost behind all of them.
Yes.
and a hangover. So,
Yeah.
but it's It's interesting that it changes it and some of the input that you were taking. And when I manage investment portfolios, and when I do that, I intentionally look at different sources of media. I look at, President Trump is quite popular in the news these days. So I look at not only CNN and CNBC, but I also look at Fox News. And I don't say either one is right, but what I'm looking for is contrarian opinions a lot of the time,
Yes.
that I can understand what I'm trying to look at. So it doesn't always confirm what I'm thinking, because I'm not going to grow and learn unless I look for things that challenge my thought process. And so listening to new things that you didn't know about and educating yourself on those podcasts and YouTube and getting those other forms of input is sounds like it's really beneficial in that part of your financial growth. As you started to grow, how did you what was that first success point that you could say? Like, was there a benchmark that you say, you know what, I've officially turned the corner here, this is my benchmark?
It was definitely like when I got out of debt, and then like buying my first property was was a benchmark. I think the biggest one is when a friend of mine asked me for advice with their money. Just to be able to talk openly about money with friends felt different because they knew what I've been putting out. They wanted to know like what I thought. And so I would just share with them like, hey, I was in your situation, this is what I would do and everything. But I would always tell them, go to someone that's more qualified than me, and, ask the questions that I've brought up to you, so that there's more guidance on that. And it's just not just me like, hey, this is what I would do and everything, but they trusted my word, and they would seek others for, for more official advice and everything.
Right. But the conversation has to start somewhere, right? And it's that,
Yes, the
that
conversation.
inception, all of a sudden someone plants the seed. I remember, so I ran 100 miles in last September. And
Wow.
yeah,
Congratulations. I just have to say that.
it was an amazing experience. Actually, it was David Goggins, the Navy SEAL,
Yeah.
right? He inspired me. I'm like, you know what? I am holding it back here. I should be, this is thing. But the inception from planting that seed came from when I ran a half marathon, and I thought that was the most insane thing anybody ever did. And there's a guy that ran a marathon, and he's like, nah, marathons, it's not 2 times a half. It's just kind of like a little bit more. I'm like, I'm not training for that. That's insane. Who needs to run 42 kilometers, 26, uh,
26 miles.
20, 26 miles, right?
Yeah.
And so I was like, you know what, but that seed. And then later on, that those other influences in my life said, you know what, yeah, I can run around the Lake Simcoe up here and run 100 miles in one go. And so there was that inception that started happening, and it seems like that started to happen with some of your friends as well. So good for
Yes.
you, right, for being that example for them. And it's not that you need to be, but it's great to see that we all influence each other. For example, this interview is going to influence me, and that's really important. And I appreciate the inception that's happening with financial literacy and spreading the word. And so there's a lot of things that are going to translate down the road that I don't even know about yet. So that's very exciting. But you bought a property, and was it a property that you lived in, or was it one that you just rented out?
So it was one that I lived in. In the military, they provide you extra allowance for housing allowance. So I bought that property with the intent to just live there. And I always play this worst case scenario in my head. If like I can't rent out the other rooms, can I afford this on my own? And it was like a hard yes. And I was like, I should definitely take advantage of this. The military's, just like I've mentioned earlier with college or the TSP, another thing that I could take advantage of that the military was providing to me, which was the housing allowance. Now I could have easily went and rented a place and saved that money in that end where I would rent out a cheaper place. But I knew the housing market was something that I wanted to be in. So I took that plunge after like many years of research and like really reading it, um, consuming that content there. So I bought a house, and then I rented out the 2 other rooms to people I work with in the military.
Perfect.
I rented out the bigger room to a couple. They paid extra, and then I took the smallest room in the house. Part of
Smart.
me was even thinking like, can I just stay in the garage and then run out the
Right.
other room, you know?
Yeah, it's almost a rental at that stage, but it's it's one of those things that someone had given me that advice to me, and I've been with my wife 20 years now, and we someone had told us that they're like, when you buy your first house, buy a house where you can rent out half of it and live in the other half, and live in the basement because you can get more rent for the top. And we didn't do it. And had we done that, we would have had our financial situation would have been way farther ahead. And it sounds like you did that, and so that was amazing. Were you with your now wife at the time when you had that?
No, I was not. We just got together after I bought it and everything.
So
Yeah.
so living under the stairs like Harry Potter was not going to work for her, I think. So
No.
yeah, well, that's amazing though. But you know what? There's a pattern that I'm noticing. Is one of them is you said you're maxing out your TSB. You're looking at your college funding as well. You've now taken advantage of uh, the rooming the funding that they help out with. But these are all things that you had to say yes to and act on, because there's a lot of fear that, hey, I
Yes.
don't know if my TSB is going to work out. I don't know if buying a house is going to work out. I don't know if I'm going to change jobs. The fear of the unknown and not knowing what could happen in the future, people are comfortable where they are. And so we don't make these changes. But what about those? You've taken some chances to change where you're currently comfortable at. What about that? Like, is there something there that other people aren't seeing that made you say yes and take advantage of these opportunities?
For me, I forget who said this quote, but it was one of those like, everything I want is on the other side of fear.
Mm,
So whenever I have that fear of the unknown, I, like I've mentioned, I've played both worst case scenario and the ideal situation. And if I'm able to stomach that worst case scenario, it's like, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to go for what's on the other side of that fear.
it's amazing. That's like, and I don't think, like you said, you weighed the risks. So you were planning, you said, hey, can I rent out these rooms to somebody? And you had a pool of people who you have, who probably needed housing. And so you started putting these pieces together to mitigate those risks for yourself, but also looking to take advantage of it. So while the jump has some risk, but how do you mitigate those risks? And it sounds like you went through that process on a number of things, and there's a bit of faith knowing that it will work out and it will get through it. But that's amazing that you had to take that jump. Um, I know we've been chatting for a while. I'd love to sort of maybe we could skip a part and then reverse engineer back, because I was
Yeah.
watching your August video on you did a live thing on your Mint app and you were showing where your net worth is today. Maybe you could, there was that transition, that budgeting part. That's a really important conversation, but I'd love to jump forward about where you're at now, and and then we could talk about like what led you in between that buying that first house and where you're at now.
So for me, buying that first house, as I've mentioned, just being able to take advantage of the housing allowance that the military provides for me. And then when I got stationed to San Diego, I turned that first property into a full rental. And then I was hoping to house hack on my next one, but I wasn't able to. So I just bought a place that was more, I knew it was going to go up because it was near a beach, it was near a great school district in California. So it was just something small for me and my wife. And then I turned that one into a rental.
Oh, okay. Single
And
single unit, like, or was it more than one set of tenants?
yeah, it's a single unit. Just it was a condo and
Perfect.
everything. So
Okay.
California prices, it was, yeah, people are like shocked when I tell them like I live by the beach and everything. And I try to tell them like, I had to sacrifice a lot before to get to where I was now, and turning that into a rental and potentially selling it just because it's a condo, whole different conversation there.
Yeah.
Um, so that's where I'm at with like trying to think what's the next moves for me while I'm here in Japan. I unfortunately am not able to live out in town here in Japan just
Mhm.
because I'm married. They provide the housing. So it's one less thing that I have to worry about with having a mortgage or utilities to cover everything's paid for by the military. So
Perfect.
now
And your wife, she joined you in Japan?
yes,
Awesome.
she's here with me. It worked out. She has her own online business with personal training and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, I know you
So
guys do the health and wealth thing, so that's amazing. The and so are you renting out the condo in California right now, or is that
so
your San
right
Diego?
right now I was going to, but just because of how the market is, I wanted to take advantage of selling it, and
Okay.
with it being a condo, my style is I prefer single family or multi-family, and condos aren't really my thing with holding as a long-term hold.
Okay. And so
So
you got rid of it?
not yet.
Yeah.
It's
That's
actually it'll be put out to for sale. It'll be put out on the market soon, and then I'll use those funds and put that into a property somewhere like in the South, such as Texas or even Tennessee, somewhere where I could purchase a multi at a cheaper price than California. As much as I love California, I know my money will go farther down
So how,
south.
how does being a tenant work with, or being a landlord work with not living in the same country? How do you own property somewhere else and manage it? Like, how do you deal with that?
So my sis, as much as I would love to be able to be the one to self manage, I have a team in Fresno in Central California that manage my property there. The great thing with her managing my property is she knows I'm always looking for properties. So
Mm.
she'll bring me deals to my email and tell me like, hey, this person's planning to sell. Do you want to try to like look at it and then assess the numbers and everything? So
And
it's
they're
like I
all
have
with rentals.
yes, they're already rentals already. So I know the turnover of like, okay, I just need to buy that from that person and then make any adjustments that I would want to or need to, and then put it back out in the market. So having a great property manager in Central California is like having boots on the ground, like
Yeah,
doing the reconnaissance.
yeah, exactly, right. And they and so they'll know the property, they'll know the tenants, they'll know where they're at, and so you have a very good insight. So maybe if anyone's looking, become friends with property managers. They might have an insight into which properties they're looking to sell, and because they'll probably hear even before a real estate agent, or maybe not, but they're definitely going to be part of that conversation with the property owners. Um,
Yes.
and and so how do you balance out real estate versus investing in stocks and bonds, and how do you balance those out?
So for me with real estate, it's just setting aside capital every month that I know is for my real estate, and then for the you said stocks and bonds, right? Not the TSB or
Well, what's the TSB invested in? Like, is it mutual funds, ETFs, stocks, bonds type of thing, or
oh, it's mutual funds.
mutual funds? Okay, perfect. And then so
So
yeah, because they're two totally different asset classes, right? One is more volatile with the markets. The other one is just less liquid, with it being real estate, and like they're different beasts, right? And some people, it comes down to, I think, feelings a lot of the time about how I feel about holding real estate and becoming a tenant, and all the problems that can go wrong with it, and those risks. And then there's also the stock market and the variability and the lack of control that you have there. So there's control on the one side, but then there's also the liquidity and the faith, knowing that it's going to work out on the other side. And you know, they're two very different things. I think it takes very different mindsets. How do you approach the different investing, because they're very different.
for me, I kind of pay attention to the season of what's going on in my life right now. Now that I'm away from the US and not closely related to my property, I decided to switch over to more stocks and bonds and everything. And I think I've always been doing that when I first got in the military of like when I first got in, I was investing in stocks
Yeah.
and I didn't know about real estate. And then when I went to my next command, I looked into real estate
Uh,
and then I stayed in real estate for quite some time. And then I'm at the last half or the last part of my career almost. So it's like jumping back into stocks. It's like a full circle of just the different investment classes that I've gone through and done while in the military.
That's amazing though. And how long have you been in the military?
Oh man, I am now at 16 years. I'm going to be in 16 years.
Amazing. It's amazing. Are you hoping to go the full 20? Is that usually the benchmark where people uh,
Yes.
first tranche goes out? Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm planning to do 20. I never, if you would have asked 18-year-old me, I would have never had that plan, but it just worked out to like, I'm 4 more years out. I have my contract signed, and now I just want to take advantage of everything that I can before I exit that door.
Yeah, it's amazing though, right? To spend 20 years doing something is a phenomenal thing, and it's commitment. And my grandfather always said to me, he's like, I always tried to find the perfect job, and then 40 years later I retired. So we just ended up staying at the same job, but there's a benefit to that too, is that you get to explore and take advantage of everything that organization has to offer you, and so that's amazing though. As next steps, so your 4 years, you're being smart about your money, you're conscious of your budgeting, you're allocating, taking advantage of different opportunities that come up, you're willing to jump and say yes to some things and mitigate your risks as much as possible. What's next for you?
Next for me, currently I'm working on my master's. The military is going to pay for that one.
Amazing. And what are you taking it in?
Uh, Organizational business management.
Nice. And you didn't start when you were 18, you didn't go to college or university before, right?
No, like the Navy was like my college experience, I guess. Being deployed and everything. Yeah, I didn't start on working on my degrees until like after at my 8-year mark, I want to say.
Yeah. And what was your undergrad in?
Business management.
Oh, perfect. So
Yeah.
you're heading down that education of business, finances, money, and you're continuing to pursue it as well. It's like an evolution of learning, whether it's on the personal finance side or in an institutional education setting. So you got your master's going on. What about the investment side? As you go forward, are you looking to build more of a real estate portfolio, or are you looking for more of a stocks and bonds? Like how do you see, what do you prefer? What do you I guess you've been full circle in it. So what's the flavor of expectation going forward?
So I prefer real estate, but as I've mentioned, currently like where I'm at, I definitely want to get back more into stocks and just not like a day trader like aspect, but just really like understanding the numbers and looking and learning that. And then like whenever I'm out of the military, when I retire, jumping back into real estate.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's there's a number of things you can do. And yeah, how old are you? How old are you? Do you mind if I ask?
I'm 35.
Perfect. Okay, so you're 35, and this is probably going to blow a lot of people away. They check out your YouTube video. I know you showed them your net worth on Mint. Would you say it?
Oh, my net worth?
Yeah.
Oh, it's about 700,000. Yeah, 700,000.
35 years old, 16 years in the military, about 700,000 net worth. Like that's a phenomenal accomplishment. And coming from somebody who is negative net worth, when you first started in the military, you were on a trajectory that was heading into debt, heading into more debt, and probably likely to stay there unless something had changed. And if you look at it, if you're just to take a clip of 16 years, you've had it. It's amazing what you can accomplish in 16 years. It's not that long of a time frame, but you've gone from negative debt to very positive net worth, and that's a phenomenal accomplishment, right? That is something that is something to strive for sure. And imagine if anybody can take that 16-year period and do something in it. It's a long time to accomplish it, and day to day, 16 years goes very slow. But looking backwards, it's probably been a pretty quick journey.
Yeah. Yeah, one of my favorite quotes is we overtask ourselves with what we could do in a day, but under task ourselves with what we could accomplish in a year.
Yeah.
So if we're able to just really look at our goals and everything in a 1 year, 5 year outlook, it's amazing to know what we're able to accomplish.
So it's phenomenal, right? To take that longer term approach. Like the mindset part of this is so important, right? That
Yes.
having that willing to just, and like you said, it was just cutting out cigarettes. It probably started with those 3 packs a week, and now you're 700,000 in net worth compared to negative net worth before, and that's like it's just so inspiring, right? And like you say, there are people, even if someone's starting later in their career, and you said there was a more senior person in that course in Guantanamo that was further along, had more debt, but they change things and change their trajectory just like you had? And I bet the probability is yes, they would probably still have the same opportunity to change their trajectory just like you have. And I always, even when I'm working out on my fitness in my body, because I realize that if I just do nothing, I'm not going to stay the same. I can't do nothing and get better. My body will get worse if I do nothing. If I work out, I can either choose to like be less unhealthy, I can choose to maintain, or I can choose to get better. But doing nothing will always just get me worse. And so I have to do something. And it's what level of something do I want to accomplish it at? And so, do I want to take massive action? In some areas of my life I do, in others I want to take a more laid back approach. And it's interesting in that respect. And so so that's my main takeaway from all of this is little actions can change a trajectory over a very long time horizon to do something
Yes.
quite meaningful. And if someone were to say, you know what, I'm going to take the next 20 years, even if you're 40 to 60, that's you can accomplish something quite large in that time frame. And your income is probably higher if you're starting at 40. So if you were to sort of hit the reboot button, you're starting from a higher income, and the leverage ability of leveraging that higher income might be something as a positive, not necessarily negative when you're looking at the amount of debt that you might have or the net worth that you have. They do have an option, and maybe they don't want to live under the stairs like Harry Potter, but
Yeah.
there's lots of options. So yeah, this has been such an amazing conversation. I've been really inspired by your story and the financial literacy and the giving back and be willing to share. And because it's hard to go out and put yourself out there and to say, hey, here's my life, here's what I went through, and I'm gonna talk. People are gonna look at me, they're gonna hear me, they're gonna I'm worried about being judged. And now I'm also gonna share money things that are very private for a lot of
Yes.
people. And did your family, did they teach you a lot about money? Did you have that upbringing about conversations about money or anything, or like?
No, I didn't have conversations about money with my parents. It was, yeah, it was the opposite. We would like go get not payday loans, put things on layaway. I don't know if you remember what that is. I don't know if they still have that actually,
It's like the
but
don't pay a cent event for like the next few
yeah,
years.
or they would be in credit card debt. So it wasn't after I, you know, I was away from my parents and I was like really on my own. I mean, I had other adult, what do you call this? Adult examples like my uncles and my aunts that I would look at and see like, oh wow, like they have their own house. So it was like balancing out, the good dad, rich dad
Mm, that makes,
ordeal.
yeah,
And then,
that different, at least that you get that inception of that. Hey, it could be like that. They're related. There's something there that if I just change something, it's good. It'll have a different outcome. And that's amazing.
yeah, we didn't
Um,
talk about money growing up. So it
no.
was one of those,
So it's not like you had a head start or anything, right? And or knew any different than what you just knew from growing up, and that's a pretty phenomenal thing. They so what's your message that you're trying to leave? If you could say to anybody, regardless of career stage, if they're trying to accomplish something, is there something you would leave them with that in your journey that you think is worthwhile sharing? Any takeaways you think?
for me, it would be just track the small things, because once you track it, you're able to um, manage it. And then once you're managing it, you're able to improve upon it. So if I'm not like watching how many cigarettes I was smoking, I would just keep smoking. But once I realized like, oh my gosh, like I'm spending X amount at 3 packs a week. Now let's come up with a plan to be able to improve of not smoking anymore. and then from that, build on to other better habits.
That makes sense. Yeah, that is a very powerful one. When I was in basic training, they had the sign above us that said details matter, and it's very applicable for a lot of things. So just I hear that with all my clients that start changing their trajectory of their financials, and that's just paying attention to the details and becoming understanding of where they're at and knowing the little details about where they're spending their money. So thank you for sharing that. That's a very strong message. If people were to find you, where would they find you? Out on the World Wide Web? How can they learn more and follow along your journey?
So my main platform with sharing my journey is YouTube. You can find me there if you just search Mike Damazo, Damazo. And then on Instagram, I have fitness.wealth and also Mike Damazo. Fitness Wealth is more of like the brand I'm trying to build out for sharing the journey, because I believe in the direct correlation with your health and wealth.
100%. That's when you start taking control in one little area, you realize you can, and you start branching out to the other areas of your life. And that a lot of people do that, and so you're spreading that message. So thank you for doing that. And so make sure you guys find Mike on the internet, reach out to him and say thanks for sharing the message. Reach out. I find it's really important just to reach out and say thanks for spreading your message, and let Mike know, whether it's a comment on a video or a DM somewhere or a like or a follow. It's important. Just if you found value in this, definitely let him know that there was value in there. So thank you, Mike, for sharing your message. I really appreciate your story, your vulnerability, all the learnings that you've got. Now we can share, and we're stronger as a community together. So thank you very much. I really appreciate your time today.
Awesome. Thank you for everything, Trevor. I appreciate you. Can't wait for this interview to come out.
Yeah, I'm very excited. Thanks so much, Mike.
Awesome.